I won't drag you out of the grave you dug for us.
Andrew Kane stared at the rain streaming down his office window, his reflection barely visible in the dim afternoon light. At 43, he had learned to mask his emotions behind the calm facade of a successful systems architect. Most people saw him as the quiet tech expert who worked for the Department of Cybersecurity, driving his modest Honda to work each morning, eating lunch at his desk, never making waves. They had no idea about the $11 million sitting in carefully managed investment accounts. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Kane, your wife called. She wants you to pick up Sophie early today." Andrew's chest tightened. Sophie. His 6-year-old daughter was the only pure thing left in his increasingly complicated world. While his wife, Allison, grew more distant with each passing month, Sophie remained his anchor. Her gentle laugh, her artistic soul, her shy smile that reminded him why he worked so hard to provide for his family. "Tell her I'll be there in 20 minutes, he replied, already reaching for his jacket. The drive to the Rosewood estate took him through the most exclusive part of the city. Massive colonial homes sat behind iron gates, their manicured lawns speaking of old money and older secrets. His in-laws' property dominated the end of Elm Grove Avenue, a testament to 3 generations of banking success that Allison never let him forget he hadn't quite matched. Andrew parked in the circular driveway, noting Richard Lawson's silver Porsche tucked discreetly behind the fountain, his jaw clenched. Lawson's presence at family gatherings had become disturbingly frequent, always with some excuse about investment opportunities or market discussions. He approached the front door, then hesitated. Sophie's laughter usually echoed from the garden at this time of day, but today the house felt strangely quiet. Following his instincts, Andrew walked around to the side entrance that led to the conservatory. Through the French doors, he could see into the formal sitting room. His breath caught. Sophie stood at the massive mahogany table, tears streaming down her small face as she struggled with wine glasses that were clearly too large for her hands. Her grandmother, Patricia Rosewood, loomed over her, arms crossed, expression cold as winter. "Again?" Patricia's voice cut through the glass. "Wash them properly. Maybe your father never taught you what effort looks like." Andrew's hands formed fists at his sides. He forced himself to remain still, to listen. Bob Rosewood, Allison's father, laughed from his leather chair. "She has his genes, Patricia. No wonder she fumbles like a waitress." The sound that came next shattered something fundamental in Andrew's chest. Allison's laughter. His wife, Sophie's mother, was laughing at their daughter's tears. "Let her learn now," Allison said, her voice carrying the casual cruelty Andrew had been hearing more and more lately. "I married a disappointment. I'm not raising one." Sophie's small shoulders shook as she tried again to clean the glass, her tiny hand slipping on the wet surface. Andrew watched his daughter flinch when Patricia stepped closer, watched her bite her lip to stop the tears, watched her try to disappear into herself. He backed away from the door, his mind reeling. In 6 years of marriage, he had watched Allison grow colder, more critical, more obsessed with status and appearances. But this was something else entirely. This was cruelty. Andrew returned to his car and sat in the driver's seat, hands trembling on the steering wheel. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to Allison's contact. Her last message was from 2 hours ago. Working late on Sophie's school fundraiser. Pick her up at 6. But she was here, at her parents' house, laughing while their daughter cried. He started the engine and drove home, his mind working through possibilities and plans. By the time he reached their modest house in Brookfield Heights, a neighborhood Allison constantly complained was beneath their station, Andrew had made several decisions. First, Sophie would never endure that humiliation again. Second, he needed evidence. Third, it was time to stop hiding his capabilities. That evening, Andrew sat in his home office while Allison attended what she claimed was a board meeting for the children's art program. Sophie was finally asleep after spending an hour in his lap, reading stories and eating ice cream for dinner, something that would have earned him a lecture about proper nutrition had Allison been home. He opened his laptop and began typing. The first email went to Marcus Webb, a private investigator he'd worked with during his corporate security consulting days. The second went to Dana Price, one of the best family attorneys in the state. The third went to his financial advisor with very specific instructions about liquidity and asset protection. The fourth email was the most important. "James, I need to activate the contingency plan we discussed 3 years ago. Full documentation, multiple recording devices, complete digital surveillance package, timeline, immediate. Cost is irrelevant. James Hoffman owed Andrew a considerable favor. 5 years ago, Andrew had discovered a major security vulnerability in the banking software James's company provided to most regional financial institutions. Instead of reporting it through official channels, which would have destroyed James's business, Andrew had quietly provided the fix and never asked for anything in return. Now he was asking. The response came within an hour. Consider it done. Installation tomorrow while family is out. Andrew closed the laptop and walked upstairs to check on Sophie. She was curled up with her stuffed elephant, her face peaceful in sleep. He kissed her forehead gently. "Daddy's going to fix this, sweetheart," he whispered. "I promise." The next 3 weeks passed in careful routine. Andrew maintained his normal schedule while James's team installed an invisible network of recording devices throughout their home. High-definition cameras, directional microphones, motion sensors, all feeding to a secure server that Andrew monitored from his office. He documented everything. Allison's constant criticism of Sophie's artwork. "That doesn't look like anything, Sophie. Try harder." Her impatience during homework. "I don't have time for this." "Figure it out yourself." Her phone calls in the garden, thinking she was alone. "Richard, I can't keep pretending much longer. When can we move forward with our plans?" The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening. Allison had gone to what she claimed was a parent-teacher conference, leaving Andrew to handle Sophie's bedtime routine. As he read Charlotte's Web aloud, his phone buzzed with an alert from the surveillance system. Someone was in their house. Andrew quietly closed the book. "Sophie, I need you to stay right here in your room, okay? Don't come out until I come back." "Is everything okay, Daddy?" "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just stay here." He crept downstairs, following the audio feed through his earpiece. The voices were coming from his home office. "Have to be more careful, Richard. If Andrew finds out..." "He won't. The man's completely clueless. Besides, once the acquisition goes through, we'll have more than enough to handle any complications." Andrew pressed himself against the wall outside his office door, recording everything on his phone. "I just need to time this right," Allison continued. "The custody arrangement has to favor me before we make any moves. Sophie's trust fund alone is worth $2 million. And Andrew's hidden assets? He thinks I don't know about the startup money. $11 million sitting in those investment accounts he's so careful about. Once I have Sophie and half his assets, we can disappear to Switzerland just like we planned." Richard Lawson's laughter was cold. "I love how he actually thinks you care about that kid, the way you've been playing the devoted mother. Please. Sophie is useful, but once she serves her purpose..." Allison's voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. Andrew felt a chill grip his chest. They weren't just planning to steal his money. They were planning to take Sophie and abandon her once they had what they wanted. He crept back upstairs, his mind racing. Everything he had believed about his marriage, about Allison's love for their daughter, had been a carefully constructed lie. But now he knew the truth, and now he could plan accordingly. The law offices of Dana Price and Associates occupied the entire 14th floor of the Meridian building downtown. Dana herself was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who had built her reputation destroying unprepared opponents in family court. "Mr. Kane," she said, reviewing the files Andrew had provided. "This is comprehensive." On her desk lay 3 weeks of documentation, photographs, audio recordings, financial records, and a detailed timeline of Allison's activities. Andrew had been thorough. "Mrs. Kane has been systematically emotionally manipulating your daughter while conducting an affair with Richard Lawson," Dana continued. "The evidence of their conspiracy to defraud you of assets and abandon the child is particularly damning. What are my options?" Dana leaned back in her chair. "Several. But first, I need to ask, how did you obtain some of these recordings?" "The legality of evidence will determine how we can use it." "My home security system. Everything was recorded on my own property with my own equipment. I've checked the state laws carefully." "Good. That makes this much simpler." Dana spread several documents across her desk. "I recommend a 3-pronged approach: immediate custody petition based on emotional damage to the child, a restraining order preventing asset dissipation, and a criminal referral for conspiracy to commit fraud. Timeline? If we file tomorrow, we can have emergency custody hearings within a week. The restraining order can be in place by Friday. As for the criminal charges, Dana smiled grimly. That depends on how cooperative Mrs. Kane wants to be. Andrew stood and shook her hand. File everything. I want my daughter protected. Consider it done. As Andrew left the law office, his phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Webb. Package ready for delivery. Coffee shop on 5th Street, 2 p.m. Marcus was waiting in a corner booth when Andrew arrived, a manila envelope on the table between them. You're not going to like this, Marcus said without preamble. Andrew sat down and opened the envelope. Inside were photographs taken with a telephoto lens. Allison and Richard Lawson at an expensive restaurant, at a hotel, entering a real estate office together. That last one was taken yesterday, Marcus explained. They're looking at properties in Geneva, already have financing arranged through Lawson's offshore accounts. How soon? Based on what I overheard, they're planning to move within 6 weeks. Lawson's acquisition of Rosewood Financial should be complete by then, giving them access to international transfer capabilities. Andrew studied the photographs of his wife and her lover, noting how comfortable they appeared, how natural. This wasn't a recent affair. It was a long-term partnership. There's more, Marcus continued. I did background on Lawson. This isn't his first time. He's been involved in 2 similar schemes over the past decade. Marry or seduce women with access to family money, manipulate them into fraud, then disappear when the heat gets too close. What happened to the other women? Marcus's expression darkened. One disappeared. The other had a convenient accident after she started asking too many questions about missing funds. The coffee cup in Andrew's hand cracked under the pressure of his grip. Are you saying? I'm saying your wife may not realize she's partnered with someone considerably more dangerous than she thinks. Andrew left the coffee shop with a new understanding of the stakes. This wasn't just about divorce or custody. It was about protecting Sophie from people who viewed her as a disposable asset. That evening, he sat in his office making calls to contacts he hadn't spoken to in years. Tech consultants who specialized in financial systems, security experts who understood offshore banking, legal professionals who dealt with international fraud. The first call went to Vincent Torres, a cybersecurity specialist who'd worked black operations for the NSA before going private. Andrew Kane, Vincent's voice was surprised. Didn't expect to hear from you again. What's the situation? I need someone tracked. Complete digital footprint, financial networks, communication patterns, high priority, unlimited budget. Personal or professional? Personal. Someone's threatened my daughter. The line went quiet for a moment. Vincent had children too. Send me the details. You'll have everything within 72 hours. The second call was to Rebecca Martinez, a forensic accountant who specialized in offshore shell companies. She'd helped Andrew track down embezzled funds during his corporate consulting days. Rebecca, I need a favor. International money laundering investigation, multiple shell companies, Swiss banking connections. How deep are we talking? Deep enough to bring down everyone involved. I have partial financial records, but I need the complete picture. This is going to cost... Cost is irrelevant. Lives are at stake. The third call was to James Patterson, a former FBI agent who now ran a private investigation firm with government connections. James, I need law enforcement coordination. Major financial crimes case, international scope, federal jurisdiction required. What kind of timeline? Days, not weeks. I have evidence that needs to reach the right people before the targets disappear. By midnight, Andrew had assembled a team of specialists who could dismantle Richard Lawson's operation from multiple angles simultaneously. Each contact owed him favors from past collaborations, and each understood that this wasn't just business, it was personal. The emergency custody hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday. Dana had filed with surgical precision, detailed documentation of emotional distress, expert testimony about psychological damage, and enough evidence of parental unfitness to make any judge take notice. But Andrew wasn't waiting for the court system. On Monday morning, he drove Sophie to school as usual, then headed to his office at the Department of Cybersecurity. His legitimate work provided perfect cover for what he was actually doing, using his high-level access to trace Richard Lawson's financial networks. What he found was disturbing. Using his access, Andrew traced Lawson's fund through layers of shell companies into Swiss banks. The system was sophisticated, but he'd cracked tougher ones. Using his security clearance, Andrew accessed international banking databases that most investigators couldn't reach. Each query had to be carefully crafted to avoid triggering audit alerts while gathering the evidence he needed. He documented every connection, every suspicious transfer, every regulatory violation hidden within the seemingly legitimate transactions. Vincent Torres called that afternoon with preliminary results. "Your boy Lawson is dirty as mud," Vincent reported. "I've traced communications with known money launderers in 6 countries. He's been running this operation for at least 5 years, maybe longer. The Dominican Republic connection alone involves 47 million in suspect transfers. How much total? Conservative estimate? 200 million over the past 3 years. This isn't small-time fraud, Andrew. This is major league criminal enterprise." Andrew felt his resolve harden. These people had been using his wife to steal his money and abandon his daughter, but they were also funding international crime on a massive scale. More importantly, he found the weak points. Every financial system had vulnerabilities, places where a small pressure could cause massive problems. Andrew identified 3 critical junctures in Lawson's money laundering operation where a carefully timed disruption could cause the entire network to collapse. Lawson's empire relied on regulatory blind spots, complex shell structures, and perfect timing. Andrew had the tools to break all 3. He made the first move that afternoon. Using his official access to investigate potential terrorist financing, Andrew flagged one of Lawson's shell companies for enhanced scrutiny by federal banking regulators. The flag would trigger automatic freezes on related accounts while investigators conducted their review, a process that typically took several months. But Andrew didn't stop there. He simultaneously filed reports with FinCEN, the Swiss Financial Market Supervisory Authority, and the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority. Each report included detailed evidence of suspicious transactions, complete with account numbers, transfer dates, and connection diagrams showing the money laundering network. The second move came Tuesday morning. Andrew anonymously provided information to a Swiss banking compliance officer about suspicious transactions from Lawson's primary offshore account. Swiss banks took money laundering allegations very seriously, especially when provided with the kind of detailed evidence Andrew had compiled. The tip went to Klaus Steinberg, the compliance director at Banca Helvetica, where Lawson kept his primary Swiss accounts. Andrew had researched Steinberg carefully. The man was famous for his aggressive pursuit of money laundering cases and had personally frozen over $1 billion in suspect funds during his career. Andrew's anonymous email to Steinberg included bank records, wire transfer documentation, and a detailed analysis showing how Lawson's accounts were being used to launder money from illicit trade and arms dealing operations. The evidence was overwhelming and meticulously documented. By Tuesday afternoon, nearly $40 million of Lawson's assets were frozen pending investigation. Rebecca Martinez called with additional intelligence. "I've mapped the complete financial network. Lawson has accounts in 7 countries, but the Swiss accounts are his primary reserves. Without access to those funds, his entire operation becomes unstable." How unstable? Catastrophically unstable. He has operational expenses of about $2 million per month, plus payments to various partners and protection money to keep law enforcement at bay. Without his Swiss accounts, he'll be bankrupt within weeks. Andrew smiled grimly. Lawson had built his empire on other people's money and other people's lives. Now, he would discover what it felt like to lose everything. The third move was more personal. Andrew arrived at Sophie's school at dismissal time to find Allison already waiting, her face flushed with anger. "We need to talk," she hissed as soon as Sophie was safely in the car. "I'm sure we do." They drove home in tense silence, Sophie chattering about her day while tension crackled between the adults. Once Sophie was settled with her homework, Allison cornered Andrew in the kitchen. "Richard's accounts have been frozen," she said without preamble. "Do you know anything about that?" Andrew continued loading the dishwasher, his movements deliberate and calm. "Should I?" "Don't play games with me, Andrew." Someone provided information to federal investigators, someone with access to confidential financial data. "That's concerning. Perhaps Mr. Lawson should be more careful about his business practices." Allison's eyes narrowed. "You think you're so clever, don't you? The quiet little tech worker who thinks he can manipulate systems and get away with it?" Andrew turned to face her, his expression calm. "I think I'm a father who protects his daughter. Everything else is just details." "Your daughter?" Allison's voice rose dangerously. Sophie is my daughter too, and if you think— Sophie, Andrew interrupted, his voice still steady, is a 6-year-old child who has been emotionally damaged by people who claim to love her. That ends now. Allison stepped closer, her face flushed with rage. You sanctimonious piece of garbage. You sit here in your little suburban house driving your pathetic Honda pretending you're some kind of moral authority. Richard has shown me what real success looks like, what real power means. Real power? Andrew's voice remained maddeningly calm. You mean the power to threaten children? To steal from families? To abandon your daughter for cash? I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm securing our future, Sophie's future, something you've been too small and weak to provide. Andrew set down the dish he was holding and faced his wife directly. Allison, I've provided everything this family has ever needed. The question is, why wasn't that enough for you? Because you're not enough! The words exploded from her with years of pent-up frustration. Do you have any idea what it's like being married to someone who has no ambition, no drive, who's satisfied with mediocrity? I see. And Richard Lawson represents your idea of ambition. Richard understands that success requires taking risks, making bold moves, not sitting in a government office pushing papers for 30 years. Andrew pulled out his phone and played a recording. Allison and Richard discussing Sophie's trust fund, their plans to disappear, their contempt for both Andrew and their daughter. Actually, I can prove quite a lot. Allison lunged for the phone, her nails raking across Andrew's wrist as he pulled back. That's illegal recording. You can't use that. In court? We'll see. In the court of public opinion? In your parents' social circles? With your precious Rosewood family reputation? Andrew pocketed the phone, ignoring the scratches on his arm. I think it will be quite effective. Allison's composure cracked completely. She grabbed a wineglass from the counter and hurled it at the wall, the crystal exploding in a shower of fragments. You think you can destroy everything I've worked for? Richard and I have been planning this for 2 years. We're not going to let some pathetic little nobody ruin our future because he's jealous of a real man. A real man? Andrew's voice carried the first hint of emotion. A real man doesn't threaten children. A real man doesn't convince married women to steal from their families. A real man doesn't build his fortune on laundering money for terrorists and pill dealers. Allison went white. What are you talking about? I'm talking about your boyfriend's real business. The money laundering, the terrorist financing, the arms dealing. Did you think that $40 million came from legitimate investments? You're lying. Richard runs a fund, international investments, international crime, Allison. Your real man has been using you to steal clean money while he washes dirty money for some very dangerous people. And when the federal investigation is complete, you're going to be charged as an accessory. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Allison's eyes. You can't know that. You're just a what? A systems architect with high-level security clearance who specializes in financial crime investigation. A former consultant who helped design the banking security systems that are now tracking your boyfriend's illegal activities? Andrew pulled out his phone again and showed her a series of government emails. The FBI, the Treasury Department, Swiss banking authorities, and Interpol are all very interested in Mr. Lawson's activities. They're also very interested in his American accomplices. Allison stumbled backward, her face pale. I didn't know. You never asked where the money came from? You never wondered why Richard needed a clean source of funds? You never questioned why he was so interested in my investment accounts? He loves me, Allison whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. He loves your access to legitimate money. The moment you outlive your usefulness, you'll discover exactly how much Richard Lawson values people who can't help him anymore. Allison's composure cracked completely. You think you can destroy everything I've worked for? Richard and I have been planning this for 2 years. We're not going to let some pathetic little nobody ruin— Mommy? They both turned. Sophie stood in the doorway, her homework clutched in her small hands, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Glass fragments from the broken wine glass glittered on the floor around her feet. Why are you yelling at Daddy? Why did you throw the glass? The silence stretched for several seconds. Then Andrew knelt down to Sophie's level, carefully stepping around the broken glass. Daddy and Mommy are having a disagreement, sweetheart, but it's not your fault, and you don't need to worry about it. Let me clean up this glass and then we'll finish your homework together, okay? As he swept up the fragments, protecting Sophie from the sharp edges, Andrew heard Allison's phone buzz with an incoming call. When she answered, her voice was tight with panic. "Richard, thank God. We have a problem. Andrew knows about the accounts. I think he knows about everything." The voice on the other end was loud enough for Andrew to hear. "Calm down. Meet me at the usual place in an hour. We'll handle this." Allison hung up and looked at Andrew with a mixture of fear and hatred. "This isn't over." "Yes," Andrew said quietly, still cleaning up the glass. "It is." The emergency custody hearing took place on a gray Wednesday morning in Family Court Division 3. Judge Patricia Morrison had a reputation for thorough preparation and little patience for unprepared attorneys. Dana Price had been very prepared indeed. "Your Honor," she began, "we have documented evidence of ongoing emotional manipulation and psychological damage to the minor child, Sophie Kane. This evidence includes recorded instances of the mother laughing while the child was forced to perform inappropriate tasks while crying, verbal disparagement of the child's father in the child's presence, and discussions between the mother and her romantic partner regarding their intention to use the child as a tool for financial fraud before abandoning her." Allison's attorney, a nervous young man named Robert Hayes, rose to object. "Your Honor, these allegations are based on illegally obtained recordings. The recordings were made by Mr. Kane on his own property, using his own security equipment," Dana interrupted. "All legal under state law. Moreover, we have corroborating evidence from independent sources." Judge Morrison reviewed the documents carefully. "These are serious allegations, Miss Price. I assume you have substantial evidence to support them?" "We do, Your Honor. If I may present our first exhibit." For the next 2 hours, Dana methodically presented Andrew's case. The recordings were devastating. Not just the content, but Allison's tone, her casual cruelty, her complete lack of maternal warmth. The photographs from Marcus Webb showed the pattern of deception. Financial records demonstrated the planned fraud. The first recording played in the silent courtroom was Allison's laughter as Sophie cried, followed by her comment about marrying a disappointment and not raising one. Judge Morrison's expression grew increasingly stern as the audio continued. "Your Honor," Dana explained, "this recording was made on September 15th at the Rosewood family residence. As you can hear, the child is clearly in distress while being forced to perform tasks inappropriate for her age and developmental level." The second recording was even more damning. Allison and Richard discussing their plans to take Sophie and abandon her once they had accessed her trust fund. Several people in the courtroom shifted uncomfortably as the cold calculation in their voices became clear. Dana presented financial evidence showing a pattern of deception spanning months. Mrs. Kane told her husband she was attending parent-teacher conferences, fundraising meetings, and children's art program events. In reality, she was meeting with Mr. Lawson to plan the systematic theft of marital assets and the abandonment of their child. Robert Hayes, Allison's attorney, attempted damage control during cross-examination. "Your Honor, these recordings are taken out of context. Mrs. Kane was merely discussing hypothetical scenarios." "Hypothetical scenarios?" Dana interrupted. "Mr. Hayes, I'd like to present Exhibit F bank records showing Mrs. Kane opened 3 secret accounts and transferred $47,000 without her husband's knowledge. Exhibit G, real estate documents showing she and Mr. Lawson viewed properties in Geneva and placed a deposit on a villa. These actions suggest the hypothetical scenarios were actually concrete plans. But the most powerful evidence was Sophie herself. Dr. Margaret Chen, a child psychologist, had evaluated Sophie over the past week. Her testimony was clinical and damning. "The child exhibits classic signs of emotional distress when asked about interactions with her mother," Dr. Chen explained. "Regression behaviors, anxiety responses, and what she described as trying to be invisible when her mother becomes angry. When I showed her photographs of her parents, her physical response to her mother's image was notably different. Shoulders tensing, voice becoming quieter, a visible attempt to make herself smaller. Can you elaborate on these behaviors, Doctor?" "Certainly. Sophie has developed what we call hypervigilance around her mother, constantly monitoring for signs of disapproval or anger. She described feeling like she does everything wrong when her mother is present. This is particularly concerning because it indicates chronic emotional stress that can have lasting developmental impacts. Dana continued the questioning. Doctor, did Sophie describe any specific incidents? Yes. She told me about being made to wash dishes while crying, and she specifically mentioned that Mommy laughed when I was sad. She also described being told repeatedly that she was not good enough and needed to try harder at basic childhood. Activities like drawing or playing. In your professional opinion, doctor, is the child being damaged by the current custody arrangement? Yes. The child is experiencing ongoing psychological damage from maternal rejection and emotional manipulation. I would strongly recommend limiting unsupervised contact until the mother receives extensive counseling. However, I should note that the father-child relationship appears exceptionally healthy and supportive. Doctor. Chen's report included specific recommendations: supervised visitation only, mandatory parenting classes for Allison, and regular psychological evaluations for Sophie to monitor her recovery from the emotional trauma. When it was time for Allison to testify, her performance was catastrophic. Under Dana's cross-examination, she became defensive, then hostile, then desperate. Mrs. Kane, Dana asked, do you love your daughter? Of course I do. How dare you suggest? Then why did you laugh when she was crying while being forced to wash dishes too large for her hands? She needs to learn responsibility, Mrs. Kane. Is teaching responsibility typically accomplished by making a 6-year-old cry while performing adult tasks? Robert Hayes objected, but Judge Morrison overruled. Answer the question, Mrs. Kane. I never meant to hurt her. I was just trying to prepare her for real life. The world isn't going to coddle her. And do you believe calling your husband a disappointment in front of your daughter teaches her about the real world? I never said... Allison stopped, realizing the recordings made denial impossible. Dana pressed forward relentlessly. Mrs. Kane, are you planning to relocate to Switzerland with Mr. Richard Lawson? Robert Hayes jumped up. Objection? Relevance? I'll allow it, Judge Morrison said. Answer the question, Mrs. Kane. We've discussed... That's a private matter between adults. Mrs. Kane, is it true that you and Mr. Lawson discussed abandoning Sophie once you gained access to her trust fund? The courtroom was silent except for Allison's ragged breathing. I would never abandon my daughter. Dana played the recording. Sophie is useful, but once she serves her purpose... The judge's expression grew thunderous. Several observers in the gallery audibly gasped. Mrs. Kane, Dana continued. Are you aware that Mr. Lawson is currently under federal investigation for money laundering and terrorist financing? Robert Hayes shot to his feet. Objection. Mr. Lawson is not party to these proceedings. Your Honor, Dana replied calmly. Mrs. Kane's association with an individual under federal investigation for serious crimes directly impacts her fitness as a parent and her credibility before this court. I'll allow limited questioning on this topic, Judge Morrison ruled. Mrs. Kane, did you know that the money Mr. Lawson used to fund your Swiss property purchases came from illegal activities? No. Richard told me it was from his investment fund. Did you ask any questions about the source of these funds? Did you find it unusual that a man would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on properties for a married woman he had known for less than 2 years? Allison's composure completely collapsed. I trusted him. He said he loved me. He said we would have a life together. And you were willing to abandon your daughter for that life? I wasn't abandoning her. We were going to... Eventually. Dana let the silence stretch, allowing Allison's inability to complete her sentence to speak for itself. After closing arguments, Judge Morrison retired for less than 30 minutes before returning with her decision. In 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen evidence of such calculated emotional damage to a child. Mrs. Kane, your behavior toward your daughter is not only harmful, but appears to be part of a deliberate strategy to use her for financial gain. Allison's face went white. Effective immediately, Mr. Kane is granted temporary primary custody of Sophie Kane. Mrs. Kane will be allowed supervised visitation only, contingent upon her beginning court-ordered counseling within 1 week. This court also orders that Mrs. Kane be restrained from removing the child from the state or disposing of any marital assets pending final divorce proceedings. The gavel came down with finality. As they left the courthouse, Dana put her hand on Andrew's shoulder. That's just the beginning. Now we file for permanent custody and start the financial discovery process. Andrew nodded, but his mind was already moving to the next phase. The custody battle was won, but the war was far from over. Richard Lawson was waiting in Andrew's driveway when they returned home that evening. Sophie had fallen asleep in the car during the drive from her school, emotionally exhausted from the upheaval of the day. Andrew carried his daughter inside and tucked her into bed before going outside to confront his wife's lover. He activated the recording app on his phone. Every interaction with Lawson needed to be documented. Lawson was everything Andrew wasn't. Tall, polished, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary. His silver Porsche gleamed in the driveway like a symbol of easy wealth and casual arrogance. But there was something different about his demeanor tonight. The easy confidence was replaced by barely controlled tension. "Mr. Kane," Lawson said, his voice carrying a slight accent that suggested expensive international schools. "I think we need to discuss this misunderstanding." "I don't think we have anything to discuss." "Oh, but we do." Lawson's smile was sharp, predatory. "You see, you've caused some complications with my business interests. Frozen accounts, federal investigations, Swiss banking inquiries, that kind of interference tends to make my associates uncomfortable." Andrew crossed his arms, studying Lawson's face. The man was scared beneath the bravado. His hands trembled slightly, and sweat beaded at his temples despite the cool evening air. "Your associates can file a complaint with the appropriate regulatory agencies." "I don't think you understand the gravity of your situation," Lawson continued, stepping closer. "I represent some very serious people who don't appreciate having their financial arrangements disrupted by small-town bureaucrats with delusions of competence. And I represent a father who doesn't appreciate strangers threatening his family on his own property." Lawson's facade cracked slightly. "Your family? Allison chose me, Kane. She's been planning to leave you for months. The only reason she hasn't is that you're more useful as a source of assets than as an ex-husband. Then she's welcome to leave. Sophie stays with me. That's not how this works." Lawson stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You're going to reverse whatever you did to my accounts. You're going to withdraw your custody petition. And you're going to quietly dissolve this marriage with a generous settlement that recognizes Allison's contributions to your daughter's upbringing." Andrew didn't move, didn't flinch. "Or what?" "Or you'll discover that accidents happen to people who interfere with my operations. Family members sometimes disappear. Houses catch fire with people inside. Little girls can be very fragile creatures." The threat against Sophie sent ice through Andrew's veins, but he kept his voice steady. "Mr. Lawson, I think you've misunderstood something fundamental about this situation." "And what's that?" "You think I'm some harmless government employee who stumbled into your business by accident. You think I'm in over my head, playing games I don't understand?" Andrew pulled out his phone and showed Lawson a photograph. Richard entering a warehouse in Baltimore, timestamped 2 days ago. "That's one of your money laundering operations," Andrew continued. "The FBI raided it this morning based on an anonymous tip. They found approximately $6 million in cash and enough documentation to trace your entire East Coast network." Lawson's face went pale. "You can't possibly—" "I can, and I have. You see, Richard, may I call you Richard? I've spent the last month learning everything about your business, your associates, your methods, your vulnerabilities. Did you know that Carlos Mendez, your contact in the Dominican Republic, has been cooperating with DEA for the past 6 months? Or that your Swiss banker, Klaus Hoffmann, is currently under investigation for terrorism financing?" Andrew scrolled through more photos on his phone. "Here's your warehouse in Newark, raided yesterday. Your storage facility in Philadelphia, raided this morning. Your boat in Miami, currently being searched by Coast Guard investigators." "You can't." Lawson's voice was barely a whisper. "I can, and I have. You wanted to threaten my family? I've systematically dismantled your entire criminal operation. Every account, every contact, every safe house. All of it is now in the hands of federal law enforcement." Andrew stepped closer to Lawson, his voice calm but deadly. But here's the part you really need to understand. If anything, and I mean anything, happens to me, my daughter, or anyone else I care about, there's a dead man's switch that will release everything I know about your activities to every major news outlet in the country. Your photograph, your real name, your associates, your remaining hiding places, all of it will be front-page news within hours. Lawson stumbled backward, his composure completely shattered. You're insane. Do you have any idea what you've done? My partners will... Your partners are too busy running from federal investigators to worry about one systems architect in Ohio. But if they do decide to retaliate, they'll find that I've prepared for that possibility too. Andrew showed Lawson one final image, a bank statement showing a transfer of $50,000 to a very specialized security firm. Personal protection for my daughter and myself, courtesy of some former military associates who take child safety very seriously. These aren't the kind of people who are impressed by expensive suits and vague threats. Lawson backed toward his car, his hands shaking as he fumbled for his keys. This isn't over, Kane. Yes, it is. Your choice now is simple. Disappear quietly and hope the federal investigators don't find you, or stick around and discover exactly how much damage one angry father can do when he stops playing by your rules. As Lawson's Porsche disappeared into the night, tires squealing as he accelerated desperately away from the curb, Andrew allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The immediate threats had been neutralized, but he knew the real work was just beginning. He called Vincent Torres as he walked back into the house. Vincent, I need continuous surveillance on my property. Lawson is desperate, and desperate men make dangerous choices. Already handled. I've had eyes on your house since this afternoon. 3-man team, rotating shifts, full perimeter coverage. And Sophie? Invisible protection at school, on the playground, during any activities. She'll never know they're there, but they'll know if anyone gets within 50 feet of her with bad intentions. Andrew felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Thank you. Andrew, you've taken down a major criminal operation. These people won't forget that easily. Stay alert, and don't hesitate to call if anything feels wrong. As Andrew locked the front door and checked on Sophie one more time, he reflected on how much his life had changed in just a few weeks. A month ago, he had been a quiet systems architect with a troubled marriage. Now he was a man at war, fighting for his daughter's life and future. The next morning brought news that confirmed Andrew's strategy was working. Marcus Webb called with updates from his law enforcement contacts. Lawson's entire network is collapsing, Marcus reported. 17 arrests across 6 states, over $40 million in seized assets, and enough evidence to put the key players away for decades. The man himself seems to have vanished, probably fled the country. And Allison? That's where it gets interesting. Apparently, she tried to access one of Lawson's accounts yesterday and found herself detained by federal agents for questioning. Nothing criminal yet, but they're very interested in her knowledge of his operations. Andrew wasn't surprised. Allison had always been greedy, but she'd never been particularly smart about covering her tracks. There's more, Marcus continued. Remember those background checks I did on Lawson? Well, it turns out the FBI has been tracking him for months as part of a larger investigation into international money laundering. Your information didn't start the investigation, it accelerated it. Meaning you didn't just destroy Lawson's operation. You helped federal agents roll up a network that was funding everything from pill trafficking to terrorism. There are going to be some very grateful people in law enforcement. That afternoon, Andrew received a call from Agent Sarah Mitchell of the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Mr. Kane, I understand you've been providing information about Richard Lawson's activities. I've been protecting my family from a man who threatened us. We'd like to discuss that protection. Would you be available for a meeting this afternoon? The FBI field office was a sterile building downtown, all concrete and bulletproof glass. Agent Mitchell turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who had spent the last 3 years tracking Lawson's criminal network. Mr. Kane, the information you provided has been invaluable to our investigation. Lawson's organization was responsible for laundering over $200 million in illegal funds over the past 5 years. I'm glad I could help. We understand that Lawson made threats against your family. I want you to know that threat is no longer credible. Mr. Lawson is currently in custody in the Cayman Islands, awaiting extradition. His remaining associates are either in prison or have fled to non-extradition countries. Andrew felt a weight lift from his shoulders. And my daughter's safety? We'll maintain surveillance on your property for the next month, but frankly, we don't expect any retaliation. Lawson's people are too busy saving themselves to worry about revenge. Agent Mitchell leaned forward, her expression serious. Mr. Kane, I want you to understand what you've accomplished. This investigation has resulted in the largest money laundering bust in the region's history. We've identified funding sources for 3 terrorist organizations, 2 major pill cartels, and exploitation networks that was operating across 5 countries. I was just protecting my daughter. You were. But in protecting your daughter, you've helped us protect thousands of other people. The weapons that Lawson's money was buying, the pills his network was distributing, the people being trafficked through his operations, all of that has been stopped because you refused to let them threaten your family. Andrew absorbed this information quietly. He had known Lawson was criminal, but the scope of the damage his network had been causing was staggering. There's one more thing, Agent Mitchell continued. We're recommending you for a commendation from the Treasury Department. Your assistance in this case goes far beyond normal citizen cooperation. As Andrew left the FBI office, his phone rang. Dana Price. We have a problem, she said without preamble. Allison's attorney wants to negotiate. What kind of negotiation? Full capitulation. She's willing to sign over permanent custody in exchange for avoiding criminal charges related to the Lawson investigation. Andrew considered this. What's your recommendation? Take it. Her association with Lawson has made her radioactive in family court. Even if she fought, she'd lose. This way, you get what you want without putting Sophie through a prolonged custody battle. What about the financial settlement? That's where it gets interesting. Allison is desperate to avoid federal charges, so she's willing to waive any claim to marital assets. She'll take nothing, no alimony, no property division, no claim to your hidden accounts that she knows about. Andrew was quiet for a moment. She's that scared? Terrified. The federal prosecutors have made it clear that her cooperation is the only thing standing between her and a 10-year prison sentence. She's choosing freedom over money. And Sophie? Complete custody to you. Supervised visitation only if you choose to allow it. She's also agreeing to mandatory counseling and parenting classes. That evening, Andrew sat with Sophie as she worked on her homework, helping her with a reading assignment about friendship and trust. As they read together, he marveled at how resilient children could be. Despite everything she had endured, Sophie was still capable of joy, still eager to learn and grow. Daddy, Sophie said, looking up from her book, why hasn't Mommy been home? Andrew had been dreading this question. Mommy has some grown-up problems she needs to figure out, sweetheart. Sometimes adults make mistakes and need time to fix them. Is she coming back? I don't know, Sophie, maybe someday, but right now it's just you and me, and that's perfectly okay. We're a family, just the 2 of us. Sophie considered this seriously. I like it when it's just us. We laugh more. The simple honesty of her observation broke Andrew's heart and mended it at the same time. Yes, they did laugh more. Yes, their home was happier without the constant tension and criticism that Allison had brought to their daily lives. I like it too, sweetheart. We make a pretty good team. Can we have ice cream for dessert? Andrew grinned. Absolutely. What flavor should we get? All of them. As they walked to the local ice cream shop, Sophie's small hand in his, Andrew realized that this was what he had been fighting for. Not revenge against Allison or justice against Lawson, but simply the right. To give his daughter a childhood filled with laughter instead of fear, encouragement instead of criticism, love instead of conditional approval. The war was almost over. Soon they could begin building their new life together. The final divorce hearing took place on a Thursday morning in late autumn. The courtroom was nearly empty, just Andrew, Allison, their attorneys, and the judge. Allison looked like a different person. The polished sophistication was gone, replaced by a hollow exhaustion that spoke of too many sleepless nights and too many hard truths. Her designer clothes seemed to hang on her frame, as if she'd shrunk inside them. Mrs. Kane, Judge Morrison began, you're requesting to voluntarily terminate your parental rights to Sophie Kane in exchange for avoiding prosecution on federal conspiracy charges. Do you understand the permanence of this decision? Yes, Your Honor. And you understand that once these rights are terminated, You will have no legal claim to custody, visitation, or any involvement in the child's life unless Mr. Kane specifically allows it. Allison's voice was barely audible. I understand. Mr. Kane, do you agree to these terms? Andrew looked at his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, for a long moment. 3 months ago, he would have done anything to save their marriage. Now, all he felt was a distant sadness for the woman she might have been. I agree, Your Honor. The judge's signature made it official. Sophie was his alone. As they left the courthouse, Allison caught Andrew's arm. I know you hate me, she said, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate, and you have every right to. But please, don't let her forget that I'm her mother. Andrew studied her face, looking for some trace of the woman he'd once loved. Allison, you spent 6 years teaching Sophie that she wasn't good enough for you. You laughed while she cried. You planned to abandon her for money. I never meant. You meant all of it, and now you have to live with the consequences. Andrew walked away, leaving Allison standing alone on the courthouse steps. 6 months later, Andrew sat in his backyard watching Sophie play with her new art supplies. She'd been in therapy with Dr. Chen, working through the emotional damage of her early years, and the transformation was remarkable. The shy, anxious child who'd tried to make herself invisible was blossoming into a confident, creative little girl who laughed easily and spoke her mind. She'd made friends at her new school, joined the children's art club, and even convinced Andrew to adopt a rescue puppy named Picasso. Daddy, Sophie called from her easel, come see what I painted. The canvas showed a house with bright yellow walls and a red door surrounded by flowers and trees. In front of the house stood 2 figures, a tall man and a small girl, both smiling. It's our house, Sophie explained, but I made it more colorful because colors make people happy. Andrew hugged his daughter, marveling at her resilience. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Should we hang it in the kitchen? Yes. Right next to the picture of us at the zoo. As Sophie ran inside to find tape, Andrew's phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline caught his attention. International money laundering ring dismantled. Dozens sentenced. He scrolled through the article, finding Richard Lawson's name near the bottom. Richard Lawson, identified as a key figure in the operation, was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for money laundering, conspiracy, and racketeering charges. Justice, Andrew reflected, wasn't always swift, but it was sometimes thorough. His phone rang. Marcus Webb. Thought you'd want to know, Marcus said. Allison Rosewood was picked up in Miami this morning trying to board a flight to Brazil. Apparently, she'd been skimming money from her parents' accounts to fund her escape plan. Her parents' accounts? The Rosewood family bank collapsed last month. Seems their son-in-law's criminal activities made regulators take a very close look at their business practices. What they found wasn't pretty. Decades of questionable loans, regulatory violations, and some connections to offshore accounts that are going to be very difficult to explain. Andrew wasn't surprised. He'd suspected that the Rosewoods' wealth wasn't entirely legitimate, but he'd been focused on protecting Sophie rather than investigating his former in-laws. What happens to Allison now? Federal charges for bank fraud and conspiracy. She's looking at 10 to 15 years, assuming she cooperates with the investigation. After hanging up, Andrew sat quietly in his backyard, processing the news. The Rosewood empire, 3 generations of banking prestige, had crumbled in a matter of months. Allison, who had once mocked his modest lifestyle and demanded he act successful, was now facing decades in prison. But none of that mattered as much as the sound of Sophie's laughter echoing from inside the house. Daddy, I found the tape! Come help me hang my picture! Andrew smiled and headed inside, leaving the past where it belonged. Behind him. 1 year later, Andrew received an unexpected letter. The return address was the Federal Correctional Institution in Connecticut, and the sender was listed as A. Rosewood. He debated throwing it away unopened, but curiosity won. Andrew, I don't know if you'll read this. I was a bad mother. There's no excuse for it. I failed Sophie and I failed you. I see that now, too late. If you ever think she should hear from me, even just to know I regret it, I leave that to you. I hope she smiles a lot. Allison Andrew read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in his desk drawer. Someday, when Sophie was older, he might show it to her, or maybe he wouldn't. That would be Sophie's choice to make when she was ready. For now, it was enough that Sophie was happy, healthy, and safe. As if summoned by his thoughts, Sophie appeared in the doorway of his office wearing paint-splattered clothes and a bright smile. "Daddy, I finished my painting for the school art show. Want to see?" "Always." She led him to her art corner, where a large canvas displayed a vibrant scene of a park filled with children playing, parents watching, and dogs running freely. In the center, a small girl with dark hair stood next to a tall man, both of them laughing. "It's called Happy Day," Sophie explained. "Miss Peterson says it shows good use of color and emotional expression." Andrew studied the painting, noting the confident brushstrokes and joyful energy that radiated from every corner of the canvas. This was the work of a child who felt safe to express herself, who believed the world was a place where happiness was possible. "It's magnificent, Sophie. I'm so proud of you." "Will you come to the art show next week?" "All the parents will be there." "I wouldn't miss it." Sophie hugged him tightly, and Andrew realized that this moment, this feeling, this absolute certainty that he had done the right thing was worth everything he had sacrificed to achieve it. The past was finished. The future stretched ahead of them, bright with possibility, and Sophie would never again have to try to make herself invisible.